Culture Ward, where we dissect and dismember pop culture in all its forms. My name is Jess, and today we're going to take a break from Daredevil content to talk about another upcoming and anticipated sequel to an established franchise, Assassin's Creed Shadows, which is set to finally release later this week. I have been playing video games for a long time. I started way back in the 80s with an Atari 2600 and a Commodore 64, and I upgraded in nearly every single generation of console since. From Nintendo to Sega Genesis to PlayStations 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I have played them all. Every generation got better, and very visibly so. The Sega was so much better than an Atari, or even an NES. The first PlayStation was miles ahead of Sega, and so forth and so on. I remember being blown away by Grand Theft Auto 3 running on a PlayStation 2. I was so impressed, it was the reason I bought a PlayStation 2. But the biggest leap, at least to my eyes, was from the PlayStation 2 to the PlayStation 3, or from the 6th generation to the 7th. Not only were the consoles faster, but they also gained high-definition resolution. For the first time I played a game on our PS3, I was mesmerized. I don't even think the game was that great. It might have been Pirates of the Caribbean. But it didn't matter. The graphics and animations were far superior to the PS2, which by that time had been gathering dust for a year or two, and the gameplay was so much more sophisticated than anything that came before it. The PS3 reinvigorated my desire to play video games, as much as Grand Theft Auto 3 had done before. One of the games that impressed me most on the PS3 was a brand new title called Assassin's Creed. Released by Ubisoft in 2007, Assassin's Creed was an open-world action-adventure game set during the Crusades in the Holy Land. You play as a 12th century assassin, Altair ibn Lahad, or just Altair, who is carrying out assassination missions and searching for artifacts around a large open-world map. Well, actually you play as Desmond Miles, a modern-day man who uses a device called the Animus to access genetic memories of his ancestor, Altair. A shadowy corporation named Abstergo has essentially kidnapped Desmond and is making him relive his ancestors' memories in order to locate, in the present day, powerful artifacts that have been lost in the past. It turns out that Abstergo is a modern-day front of the Knights Templar, and there has been a war waging between the Templars and the Order of Assassins for millennia, both factions fighting for peace with different means. You know, the assassins are the good guys. This plot device of having a current-day person being able to access the memories of an ancestor and relive through virtual reality some part of the past allows nearly infinite possibilities of settings and protagonists. Admittedly, the present-day part of the game is kind of dull, but you spend most of the time, like way more than 90%, inside the Animus, that is, in the memories of your ancestor, playing as a master assassin in some historical epoch. Nobody cares about the present-day storyline in the Assassin's Creed stories. It's just a plot device. You explore accurate reproductions of several 12th century towns in the Holy Land during the Third Crusade, including Damascus and Jerusalem. You use parkour, stealth, and a counter-based hack-and-slash combat mechanic, and your primary objectives include completing high-profile assassinations. While some of the gameplay was familiar, open-world games had become relatively commonplace by this time, it did introduce some elements that I was unfamiliar with, including social stealth, the ability to blend into a crowd of NPCs to lose pursuing enemies. In fact, this game was at its best when you were trying to hide, using stealth and strategy to get to your target. The combat was pretty clunky, but it encouraged you to use strategy and stealth because fighting multiple enemies could be quite tricky. It was truly a cool game, and not like anything I had seen before, and it launched a massive franchise. Since that first Assassin's Creed game, there have been 12 additional main titles, including a bunch of ancillary games released for handheld devices. And Assassin's Creed Shadows will make the 14th main title. Assassin's Creed 2 was released in 2009, featuring a new protagonist named Ezio. Well, Ezio Auditore de Firenze, but we just call him Ezio. The setting for this game was 15th century Renaissance Italy. Specifically, the large open-world map encompasses several towns in Italy, including Venice and Florence, as well as the Vatican. This game was a big improvement to the original, with numerous upgrades including a much more dynamic combat system, better parkour, and an expanded cache of craftable weapons. Overall, a great game, even better than the original. Renaissance Italy is such a cool setting, and you even get to interact with Leonardo da Vinci. Assassin's Creed 2 spawned two direct sequels, Brotherhood in 2010 and Revelations in 2011, both continuing with Ezio's storyline in Renaissance Italy and beyond. Brotherhood picks up the story where the last game left off, focusing on the time period between 1500 and 1507 during the Italian Wars. This time, the game is centered in Rome, which is larger than any city in either of the previous two games. The game further refined and improved game mechanics, including improvements to the combat system, making it easier to fight multiple enemies. It also introduced the ability to recruit assassins that you can then send to perform tasks or call them to your aid if needed. Brotherhood also introduced the first multiplayer system in Assassin's Creed, where players could team up online in several different game modes. Revelations is the third and final installment in the Ezio trilogy. This one is set between 1510 and 1511, mostly in and around Constantinople, which is similar in size and scale to the Rome of Brotherhood. Ezio has to find keys to unlock a library built by Altair from the first Assassin's Creed, and has to fight off the Templars, who are also trying to find the library and take over the city. While the core gameplay is almost overly familiar, Revelations did add a hook blade that allows Ezio, who is now aging and not as nimble, to traverse the city much easier. In fact, it's estimated that using the hook blade increased navigation speed by up to 30%. While still considered a great game, and actually outsold previous titles, fans complaining that the gameplay was beginning to feel repetitive, and most agree that Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood were better. The fifth main title in the franchise was simply titled Assassin's Creed 3. Released in 2012, it still featured Desmond Miles as the present-day player character, but the main narrative now takes place in 18th century colonial America. In this installment, the story follows two player characters, Haytham Kenway, a British Templar looking to establish a Templar order in America, and his son, half-Mohawk Ratana Naketan, or just Connor, who joins the Assassin Order and counters the Templars' attempts to influence the outcome of the American Revolution. The primary setting for this title is in Boston and New York, as well as a large map in the American frontier. Assassin's Creed 4: Black Flag was released in 2013. This time, the player controls a Welsh pirate named Edward Kenway, the grandfather of Haytham from Assassin's Creed 3, and is set in the West Indies during the Golden Age of piracy, 1715 to 1722. While there are several land-based locations, including Havana, Kingston, and Nassau to explore, for the first time a large part of the game is focused on ocean exploration. Black Flag introduces a sailing and naval combat mechanic to the game, as Edward captains a captured Spanish brig called the Jackdaw. Touted by many as the best Assassin's Creed game, this game is truly fantastic. The graphics, gameplay, and setting are all top-notch, and the narrative and characters are all compelling and well done. In 2014, Ubisoft released two Assassin's Creed games on the same day. Rogue was released for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, the last Assassin's Creed released for the 7th generation of consoles. The story takes place between the events of the previous two titles, thus placing the action in the mid-18th century, and again returns to the American North Atlantic region, including New York City and the Hudson River Valley. Rogue, like Black Flag before, incorporated naval action, including within rivers and not just in the ocean. In a twist, the main character, Shay Patrick Cormac, an Irish-American privateer, is an assassin who becomes disillusioned by the Order and defects to the Templars, helping to hunt down other assassins. I have to admit, I never played this game. It got mixed reviews, and while some gameplay elements were applauded, it was ultimately found to be derivative of Black Flag and felt too short. It almost felt like it was an afterthought. Released on the same day as Rogue, Assassin's Creed Unity is the 8th installment and the first to be released for the 8th generation of consoles, releasing on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. This one is set in a huge open-world map of Paris during the French Revolution, and for a long time it was my favorite one, despite the many bugs and glitches it had at launch. Playing as the assassin Arnaud Dorian, the main story revolves around efforts to expose the real powers behind the French Revolution. It featured beautifully updated graphics, revamped combat and parkour, and new stealth mechanics. While many were critical of the narrative, I quite enjoyed it. Taking advantage of the upgraded hardware of the new consoles, Unity was able to render many more NPCs on screen at a time, making crowds more dense and making gameplay more dynamic. And Paris is simply awesome. Released the following year in 2015, Assassin's Creed Syndicate was set in London in 1868 and follows the twins, Evie and Jacob Frye, who the player switches between throughout the game. Again, the game received praise for its visuals and characters, but criticized for other aspects of gameplay. All in all, it was very similar to Origins, only set in London instead of Paris, although it did introduce a new movement and travel system which includes riding carriages around town. And there is one mission in the game where the player controls Jacob's granddaughter, Lydia Frye, during World War I. Assassin's Creed Origins marked a major change in the Assassin's Creed franchise. After years of criticism for repetitive gameplay, Ubisoft totally redesigned the game for Origins. Instead of being a stealth-based action-adventure game like nearly all titles before, Origins introduced role-playing mechanics and an updated hitbox combat system. Set in Ptolemaic Egypt during the 1st century BC, the huge map was a brilliant recreation of historical places like Memphis, Giza, and Alexandria, including many iconic locations such as the Pyramids of Giza, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, and the Sphinx. You also interact with several historical people, including Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. There are once again two primary antagonists, Bayek and his wife Aya, and it chronicles the origins of the Hidden Ones, who eventually become the Assassin Brotherhood. This game is beautiful, interesting, and enormous. It received praise once again for its visuals, but also for its newly improved gameplay systems, narrative, characters, world design, and historical accuracy. Following the success of Origins, the following year Ubisoft released Odyssey. A natural progression from Origins, Odyssey expanded on the role-playing elements with further improvements to movement and combat. They also reintroduced naval gameplay and combat as well. This one is set in ancient Greece during the Golden Age of Athens, near the start of the Peloponnesian War, between 431 to 422 BC. The map for this game dwarfed prior entries, and the visuals are absolutely stunning. From the white sand beaches of Mediterranean islands to olive tree orchards in the hills of the mainland, this remains the most beautiful game I have ever seen. You can choose to play as either Cassandra or Alexios. I always choose to play Cassandra because her voice actress is so good, but the story is the same regardless of who you pick. They are brother and sister and are descendants of the legendary Spartan king Leonidas. You once again get to interact with historical figures and events, including Socrates, Pericles, and Herodotus. It is a truly great game with so much to do. You could easily spend 100+ hours on main and side quests, not even counting DLC. It's one of my favorite games of all time and definitely tops my list of best Assassin's Creed games. Released in 2020, Valhalla continues Assassin's Creed's journey into role-playing elements, though without as much fanfare as Origins and Odyssey. Valhalla is set primarily in England between 872 and 878 AD in the Middle Ages, and you play as a Viking named Eivor from Norway during the Viking expansion into the British Isles. Once again, the game has beautiful visuals, and the setting is actually very interesting. While not entirely historically accurate, it is set roughly 400 years after the fall of the Roman Empire, and the game shows medieval towns and cities built on top of and incorporated into Roman ruins. London in particular is really cool, with large portions of the Roman aqueduct system still standing around the outside of the city, and a mostly intact Colosseum in the city center. This game too boasts a large map and many hours of gameplay, however it is not nearly as engaging as Origins and Odyssey, with gameplay that seemed repetitive. I enjoyed it, but not as much as the previous two. It did manage to become one of Ubisoft's best-selling games of all time though, perhaps aided by its timing, being released during worldwide lockdowns due to a certain virus of some unknown origin. After several delays, Mirage was released in 2023. Originally planned to be an expansion for Valhalla, it was reworked to be a standalone title. The game is scaled back from the last 3 installments and returned to its roots by focusing once again on stealth and assassinations as opposed to the role-playing elements of the previous games. It is also very much shorter than the last 3 games. It's set in Baghdad during the Golden Age of Islam, and you play as Basim ibn Ishaq, a major recurring character from Valhalla in the years prior to the events of that game. As always, critics praise its visuals. One thing Assassin's Creed has always been good at is making beautiful recreations of historic locations, as well as praising its return to form and scaled-down gameplay. And that brings us up to date. Later this week, after several delays, Ubisoft is set to release the 14th main installment in the Assassin's Creed franchise in Assassin's Creed Shadows. It is the first game designed especially for the current or 9th generation of consoles, so it is expected to be a rather large update in graphics and gameplay. Set in feudal Japan during the 16th century, you play as either a female shinobi, ninja, or a male samurai. Leading up to its release, there has been some controversy about the game. For years, fans have wished for a title set in Japan, and they finally got their wish, but something wasn't quite how they envisioned it. You see, one of the primary antagonists, in a game set in feudal Japan, where Japanese ninjas would be a perfect fit for a stealth-based action game, is not a Japanese ninja. It is an African man named Yasuke, a samurai. Yasuke is actually based on a historical figure from the time period. However, there's some debate about how historically accurate it is to include him in the game as a samurai warrior. It's more likely that he received the title of samurai from Nobunaga, but never trained or fought as a warrior. Regardless of his actual historical role, he is certainly not representative of Japanese culture at the time. It's almost like they included him for some other reason. Japanese gamers are particularly upset about Yasuke's inclusion. There is very little known about him, and they find it confusing that one of the main characters in a Japanese setting would be someone who is so obviously not Japanese. So Japanese fans are puzzled that Yasuke is in Assassin's Creed Shadows. As this article states, Yasuke was an actual historical figure that lived in Japan during the 16th century and was most likely of African origin. He would also have been around during the time period this game is set. However, almost nothing is really known about Yasuke, which in part means he's a great narrative blank slate to work with, but that isn't also without its pitfalls. According to this writer, the gamers have been waiting for Assassin's Creed to come to Japan for years now. It's the land of ninjas, the epitome of stealth, so it has always been a perfect fit for a gaming series built around stealthy assassinations in an interesting historical context. Now, one of the protagonists in Shadows is indeed a ninja. Why Ubisoft didn't just stop with making Shadows about ninjas in a series where you are meant to stealthily assassinate people is somewhat beyond me, the writer writes. However, the issues start with the fact that the other protagonist is Yasuke, and he's now a samurai. The issue here, and one that Japanese gamers are pointing out in the trailer, is that Assassin's Creed is a series about retaining a degree of fidelity to historical events. That in other games in the series, people of that locale and period were consistent with history and their varying host cultures. So changing it here is odd and not in keeping with the other Assassin's Creed games, which is what Japanese fans are mostly pointing out online. So I get why it's confusing people, especially in Japan. Again, I don't know why Ubisoft just didn't focus on making the game about ninjas and they could have avoided all this nonsense. Well, unfortunately, I think we know why Ubisoft did this. It's something identity politics. I will say, the early gameplay looks great. So far, controversy or not. I'll most likely play it at some point, if for no other reason than for the beautiful setting and visuals. If it's bad, it's bad, but I will judge it on its own terms. What about you? Are you looking forward to the new Assassin's Creed game? Or are you fed up with Ubisoft and modern gaming's focus on identity politics? Let me know in the comments. As always, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and want to see more content. Bye for now. I hope to see you next time in the Culture Wars.